This presentation is on my solution for assignment 3. You've seen this run before. Just very quickly, we'll do it again. I'll pick another Steve, and I'll make this Steve Jones. Contact information, slightly different phone number. There we go. Pick a different city, Toronto. No comments. Okay, submit the information. So now, if we go back and we look at the View Guestbook, we can now see that I've added another row from what I had when I last demonstrated this to you. So let's go and look at the code and see how this is done. Here's the code. This is the first file, the assignment 3 PHP. This is the kickoff. This is very much like the HTML file we had for assignment 2 that kicked things off. However, to make this a little bit different, have this city information here, city where you want to reside. Instead of just typing in the select list, I began the city select list and I put the option, that's the hyphen right at the beginning, just so the user needs to make a selection. But now I have a PHP block of code, the beginning and ending, and it gets the root. Remember how we have to get the document.root so we know where to find our file. And then I appended on there the document root data / so it's one directory down or one folder down from the root. And then I called it cities.txt. There we go. There's the list of cities: Chicago, Detroit, Toronto, and Los Angeles. Back to the code. So I'm building the file name to be used. Now here's the little trick I showed you in an earlier lesson. To find out the number of lines in the file, I count the file name, and that brings back an integer, which is the lines in the file. There was a little comment I was using one time when I was debugging. But here I read from the file name. I have to open it for read, return the pointer into file pointer. Now I go through a for loop, starting with 1, and I make sure that the index is less than the lines in the file, and then I bump it up, or equal to actually. So I get the line, that's one line at a time, into line, trim the line to make sure there's no extraneous characters or anything at the end, and I put it in something I called file city. Now look at the option. Remember, you got to be careful with this. Here is one part of the string, and I have a double quote on the inside of this. This double quote is part of the string. It's not a string delimiter here. And then I append with a dot to the file city. Now I'm just storing Chicago, Toronto, or whatever in this value. I'm not putting the number there, but I want to display the number to the user. So let's see it. So I append. Now again, that's another string. Notice how there's 2 dots on either side of it. This is a string by itself, delimited by single quotes. But the double quote is part of the string, and it's going to close the attribute of file city within the tag that's generated. And we can always go back and look at that, actually. This is a kind of a debugging technique you may recall, is you can do a view page source here. Option value Chicago. See how those double quotes are there? Those are the ones that I'm generating as part of the string. And then 1: Chicago for option. Let's go back and look at the code. So I repeat the index thing for the index variable for the for loop, so I get 1, 2, 3, and then close it off. I put a colon afterward, again, another string, and then file city. I repeat it again because obviously I want to show the user what city they're selecting. And then we end off with the last string, and it's an option. So I have something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strings being concatenated together. So this can get tricky when you start mixing double quotes and single quotes. So be cautious when you code that. And it's usually good to maybe build up the statement one little section at a time to make sure that you've got it right. So there's not much more going on here from what we had before, except for this little link, for admin use only. Now I have a link here, an anchor tag. And I call localhost assignment 3 view guestbook. Now I mentioned that it would be good to have it open in a new window. So this is one way to achieve that. You can put target and _blank, and that will either open it in a new window or a new tab, depending on how your browser options are set up. And then just the words view guestbook. Okay, so that's all we had going on there. Let's go to the add to guestbook functionality. We get the data in the form, and it's the same kind of thing. We get the root, build the file name. Now we open for appending. It's got to be little a. I get the date from the date function into the contact date variable. I'm building up this output line using a delimited string. I'm putting these pipes in between all the information, contact choice. Now we have a lot more here than we had in the earlier example. Remember to put the new line at the end of the line, the \n, in double quotes, not single quotes. And so it emulates us having hit the return key and everything appears on a new line. Then we do the fwrite, the file pointer, on that output line. Okay, and then we close it out because we're only writing one line at a time. We don't need to loop here. And the display page stuff is just what you had before. You had in assignment 2. There's no difference than what was there before. Now, let's go to the View Guestbook page. Go to the top here. Got the logo, of course. I set up the table with a border of 1, and I've got the headings up here. You've seen this already. I'm not going to belabor that. Same thing, server on the document root over here. Build the file name. This time the file name is guestbook.txt as it was when we wrote it. Now here I'm going to check to see if the file exists. This is actually a good habit to get into. This is a function I have not shown you yet. File _exists, and you look at the file name. Before you try to read from a file, check to see whether it exists. If we look at this curly brace, I'm going to go all the way down here before I get to the else. And the else was, there are no names in the guestbook. And when I first illustrated this to you, when I was explaining the assignment in the last lesson, we saw that run. So now, go down to the code. Now, I have to set up some blank displays, or I set up a variable that's a blank display and a line counter of 0. I actually showed you that in the debugging section, that needed to be initialized. Let's go back, open for read, and again, we get a line. We know there's a file because we're in the area that says the file exists. So we read it. If we get to the end of the file, we break out of there and we're done. Bump up the line counter. This line counter is used for this little routine that we use to change the style and the background color, to alternate it. Now look at this. Here's the list. When I showed you the earlier lesson, we just did 2 names, but here we've got a whole big long list where we're exploding on the line, looking for the delimiter, the pipe. Going down, now I have the style, the display styles, just opening the cell, new cells. But down here, I said if empty comments, I didn't get a chance to illustrate this, but if the comments are empty, people don't fill them in, I'm putting in this symbol. This whole thing is a non-breaking space. Otherwise, the table, the output table, can look a little funny. It won't look like it's bordered properly unless you put something in there. So you put a non-breaking space, ampersand NBSP semicolon in there, and it makes the form cell look appropriate. So that's a little trick. And we close out the file. And now notice here at the end here, I'm printing display. I only have one print statement in here because what I did here for all of this table rows is I put it in a display area. So I could build the whole table up or all the rows in the table in this variable and just print them at the end. If I needed to do anything before the table or after the table, this can be a good technique that allows me to collect everything into one variable and just print it once. It can make debugging and gives you some flexibility in your presentation. So that's just the way I chose to do it. Before I conclude the lesson, I want to go and look at the guestbook file real quick, if we can find that. And there it is. You can see I have all these delimited by pipes. All this information, none, not applicable, no comment, everything that we had before. So I wanted you to see what that looked like. This concludes my solution for assignment 3.